Okay, it is officially noon. So, my name is Christy Thompson. I am with BIS, and we wanted to tell everyone thank you so much for joining today. Today, we're going to talk about how to defend your organization from all 13 email threat types. So, a couple of things before we get started. We are going to try to take questions throughout. You can pop them in the chat,
Okay.
and
I'll be ready.
I may interrupt Philip and Kevin along the way to get them to answer those questions. If we can't get those questions answered, we'll get everything done at the end. So we'll open it back up then. This is being recorded. A recording will go out to you tomorrow. So just be on the lookout. So let me go ahead and introduce you to our host, Philip Long. So, we actually have Philip here and our guest, of course, Kevin. But Philip, he is the CEO of Business Information Solutions. He's also the CEO of Veritas Consulting Group, and he's been in the IT industry for over 20 years. He has 600 plus clients from Gulfport to Dothan, even all the way up to Montgomery now. And current owner of 5 businesses, and he's a certified information system security professional and has a CMMC designation as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Philip to introduce Kevin.
Great. Thank you guys for coming, and I appreciate it. And want to introduce you to our guest today. This is an engineer, Kevin Davy, and he is an engineer at Barracuda. He is from Massachusetts, and that's the home state of Dunkin' Donuts. Not really, but he made mention of that to me, so I thought I'd throw it out there. You've been with Barracuda since 2017. He likes cars and motorcycles, as well as managing a crypto portfolio. We'll talk a little offline about that. I want to see if how that's working, but he's really going to bring a lot to the table today. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics and also a minor in Spanish. Takes pride in his Mexican heritage, and outside of work, he's a devoted spouse and parent to his 2 children. So, thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yep. And we're going to really work on some things, but we want to kick everything off with a poll question here. And see, we're going to pop open our poll. And the poll is we want to complete this sentence. It is 95% of cyber attacks what? And the poll should be open now. So if y'all will answer that question. Do they start with a phishing email? Are they caused by human error? Do they leverage artificial intelligence to deploy? Are targeted towards SMBs? And we're looking for 95% of the threats. Keep that open just a little longer. Got some pretty interesting stuff here. All right, we'll end there and we'll share the results. So let's see, 67% believe they start with a phishing email, 22% are caused by human error, and 11% believe that it is leveraged by are targeted towards SMBs. All right, and we're going to have Kevin reveal the answer for us. What is that, Kevin?
Yeah, it is actually the first answer there. That email is really the number one threat vector through phishing attacks.
And it really is very challenging to block email. And we're going to really get in, kind of do a deep dive on the ways that the bad guys are really sadly being successful in that attack. I can say as a company, and I'm almost scared. I've said this several times lately, but from a standpoint, it's been a very long time since we've had any client that we manage have any type of security breach other than through email. So I think that in a lot of ways we've gained some ground and maybe blocking security incidents, but I feel like that the bad guys are still winning via email. Thus, why we have Kevin on today. All right, let's talk about Barracuda. And I'll just, from my perspective, Barracuda has always been a really great company. I've been in business since 2001, so that's about almost 25 years. Barracuda has been a partner of ours at Business Information Solutions for damn near every moment since we started. So we're a big fan. But I don't know, Kevin, if you want to add anything to to this slide and all these awards.
Yes, yeah, it feels like every day we win something else. We just won the most strongest enterprise email product recently as well. So a couple of products that we have that have awards for sure. We got about 25, 29 products over at Barracuda, a bunch of different variations of those products, and really just trying to cover the full cybersecurity portfolio, email, network, data, RMM, tons of different areas where we can help. And a lot of those are working with layers, right? Because that's the way to win. There's no one solution that's going to be perfect. If one fails, you got your stuff backed up. If that's backup's not working, you got your firewalls to keep people out. If people are still getting in, we try to train users. So really working in layers is the way to go. And we got that umbrella effect. We got them all kind of combined, and we're working towards being more of a platform solution so that those products are cross-pollinating and sharing data more than they do today.
I think one cool thing is that Barracuda that differs than a lot of companies, and I know y'all have M&A'd some other products in your kind of growth, but a lot of this stuff is homegrown. Y'all developed it, which is which is in this industry you see a lot of growth, you see a lot of big companies out there, and a lot of them got that way by M&A and not really by innovation, whereas Barracuda has a lot of this stuff is homegrown, which as an entrepreneur I know that's a lot harder, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. The AI that we derive from impersonation protection for one of our email products, the more advanced email product, was a labor of love. I think it took 16 iterations of the product before we got it to be what we want, and it's been one of our star child products. So appreciate the sentiments.
Yep. All right, we'll keep moving. So on average, just a couple of stats here. On average, there's a cyber attack every 39 seconds. And of course, 95% of all cyber incidents that's another stat that kind of, I guess, that sounds a little bit, a little, disingenuous, because they are also human enabled. So we may have to give those guys that pick human enabled a pass, huh? Because
Yeah.
but a human is the person. I guess the more correct answer would be that it's through the email, but a human does have to click on it. And that's the thing that I always point out to people is why this is such a topic. And I really have been on it for a moment with clients, and in a lot of our marketing is just trying to make people more aware, because it's so difficult. And the way I like to give an example of how difficult it is that if you look at a cyber liability insurance policy, it'll have all those areas of coverage. And then when it comes down to social engineering, like you'll have $1 million worth of coverage for, a brute force attack. But when it comes to social engineering, where basically they tricked you by clicking on something, or they tricked you on the phone or something like that, it's $50,000.
Mm-hmm. They
So
know what happens.
yeah, they know what happens, but also it says a lot of things, but one thing it says is that is absolutely an area where people are getting stung.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So a little bit more here. Um, 493 million ransomware attacks, um, which is incredible. 43% of cyber attacks are against small to mid-sized businesses, and then 1 in 4 had at least one email account compromised. So it just really, and it's kind of that cascading effect, if you will. They'll send you something on email, they'll take over your account and do what they're going to do, or they'll launch something onto a local computer that'll get a foothold, and then they'll elevate privileges and kind of search around the network. You want to speak to that a little bit, Kevin, what you've seen?
Yeah, no, for sure. And email tends to be one of the cheaper ways that people can attack. Historically, you'd have to be really educated in technology to go in through the firewall to figure out what, somebody forgot to turn off or forgot to turn on, and things in that way was very complicated. Took a lot of, panning for gold, so to speak. With email, and especially with AI today, we could create attacks very quickly, very cheaply, blast it off to billions of people. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We move on to the next batch of fish. And a lot of dark hat forums are sharing information about what has worked for them. Here's a tool that is really useful that I built for you guys. Hey, cool. Now we can pick that up. And then with AI like ChatGPT and such, people can regenerate attacks to just come up with totally new attacks that if I created a content policy to pick up something, it becomes very difficult to detect. And even with language, as well, somebody coming from a different country that doesn't speak English very well, AI is going to clean that up for me too. So definitely challenging times.
Yep, for sure. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about some email threat trends. If you would, we're talking about really how the email over time has just the overall complexity. Speak to this. This is kind of an eye chart, but kind of break it down for us, Kevin, and talk to us about how the email attacks have evolved over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of from left to right is pretty much a very similar flow to how life has gone. Not only less complex to more complex, but also sort of as time goes on, it's also a timeline because it started as less complex and it's becoming more complex. So it used to be just spam, right? I hit you enough times with an email and eventually you're going to fall for it. Then they moved to malware. It's the next line item there where it's like, well, if I can just get somebody to download something, if I can trick them into thinking it's a PDF they care about, right? I'm just going to put something on their computer. Well, it's a cat and mouse game. So as they figure out something, we figure out something to block them. So we started scanning for malware. They started going for data exfiltration, URL phishing, more scams, just to try to trick people into falling for something. Maybe, hey, donate some money. Now I've got your credit card, kind of a trick. Spear phishing is kind of the game changer to me. I think that's when really there was a big aha moment in the dark hat industry, right? For the bad guys when they figured out, oh, hey, if I learn about somebody and I figure out what language they're using, what people they talk to, who they respect as an authority figure, now I can get them to do even more. So domain impersonation kind of fell in behind that. Brand impersonation, like when they're impersonating Microsoft, hey, we got this notification, come check it out. Those types of things. Blackmail, conversation hijacking, business email compromise, those all just kind of came after spear phishing because they're sort of variations of those types of things, right? They're figuring out what people are into, what they deal with, if they touch money, and then they go all the way to the very end where account takeovers when they actually figure out how to get your password, and now they got the keys to the castle, right? So they're in.
That's right. And then they can really craft a great email because they can send it on your behalf and they can send it to your contacts and they have the documents that you've exchanged prior that they can modify
exactly.
And all the magic happens. That account takeover is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing currently. And, I'll just say, kind of just lay it out for everybody and really listen on how this works because it's I've seen it a lot lately where basically you get an email and it's usually from someone because they took over their account. Well, it'll come to you, it'll have an attachment. The attachment really will take you to an image that is this is to beat the Barracuda guys. This is where they're going to take the image and it'll come off like a marketing site, a Canva where they make images or something, and it'll have all your logos or their logos, the client that you send it from. So it looks very legit. Then there's a link in there that takes you to another site that will actually pull in your Microsoft 365, even if you have like your backdrop where you log in on Microsoft 365 or logos, it'll steal all that, but it's really going to a third-party website where they steal your email address, your password, and even grab your multi-factor authentication code. And then they have the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah. And lateral phishing is another big one, right? So even if I get access to somebody's account, if I've taken over somebody's account, but it's not the right one, maybe Kevin doesn't touch money, but he's got access to other people who, we can find out who's the right guy, get me, and I can convince somebody else to click on my link.
Yep. So speak to this here. We're talking a lot of just some, I guess, really the way here's some of the tactics that
Mhm.
that the bad guys are using.
Yeah, sure. So if we look at the email that we see here in the example, the from and the reply to are actually using the same person. So the idea is that it's somebody that you may know, but it's from a different email address. Because I can claim I'm anybody I'd like to be in my display name, as it's called, which is kind of like a piece of paper that's a letter. I can write I'm Joe Biden. I can write I'm whoever, the president, of the United States, right? The second piece here is to try to get them to do something with a sense of urgency. So we're like, hey, get back to me in the next 5 minutes or else this, or hey, your files are about to expire, can you please log in and check this out, or something to that effect, to be like, don't think about this, just go, just do it, autopilot, make it happen. And then finally here from an authority figure, and in most cases, people will just sort of take it for granted, go spend the company credit card on it, as many iTunes gift cards as you can purchase with it, right? Just go do that right now. Don't tell anyone about this. It's a secret for somebody in the company, so we don't want the word to spread out. Okay, sure, no problem, right? No problem, boss, right? So a lot of times combining a lot of these methods together and others tend to push the limits of what people are able to ask for and get away with.
Yep. All right, we'll jump on this next one. Here's another type of hack.
Yep. So service impersonation. So we just saw employee impersonation on the previous slide. Now this is something like service, Microsoft in this example, but really could be anything that you are associated with. Just so happens that Microsoft has a big footprint, so a lot of people fall for these. It's a great example. What you notice is that the actual email itself has no malicious payload, which means no malicious links, no malicious attachments. As we play this cops and robbers cat and mouse game, people like vendors like Barracuda, I should say, are looking for things in the email that are triggers to say, aha, we got you. You're not allowed to have that. We can find things in the email now by scanning it. So when they send something to you with no actual malicious payload, it passes through a lot of the vendors with no issue. As we can see here, it's also hosted on a high reputation domain, so they can put something into look like 365. It can look like something that you're used to. They get all the same formatting, all the same pictures and all that, but it actually is a different page, right? Maybe the URL is different. Maybe they pushed you through a proxy so they can steal your information that you type in. Lots of different ways to come about this. But the idea is it looks like something you're used to. It seems like a harmless email. Oh, hey, could you just do this for us real quick? It's not like, hey, you better, or, I've got all your money, you better do this. It's not really threatening. It just seems like something that could sneak in on a autopilot, day-to-day basis kind of a situation that you hit out of habit.
Yep. And this is what I was speaking of earlier. Go ahead and you give your rundown on that account takeover.
Yes, exactly. So the idea here is that they go through steps, right? And there's a few slides that we can talk to each of these 4 steps, where initially there's the infiltration, right? So a lot of times the folks are going to try to compromise credentials. That's that phishing attack that we see most commonly. Maybe we send you, some virus or something that grabs some things off of your computer itself. Maybe we actually break in through your network. And then sort of once getting access to that, if you move to the next slide, the next thing that they do is they start to learn, right? So a lot of times they're not just going to get in, take action, blow up your email, send a bunch of things out. They're actually going to start to figure out, okay, what's the best way that I can capitalize on what I've got access to now, right? Because they've now got a situation where they can really maximize their profits for what they have. So learning, is this the right person to compromise? Does this person even touch money? Is this person an authoritative figure? What is the language that they're associated with? That what type of business do they do? All those types of things. And as they do that, they can now say, okay, maybe Philip has, more access. So I'm going to harvest his credentials. And then boom, monetization is when you're really like, okay, now I figured out the best way to trick these guys. This is, they do wire transfers every day. So I'm just going to sneak in a wire transfer right after one goes through and say, hey, actually send it to this address. I mistyped it, right? Or something like that. Just the sneakiest, easiest way for them to get the most out of what they've gotten access to.
Yeah.
Right?
I think one thing to also what we really ought to raise our concern about somebody getting into our email is all the documents that are inside of that box, all the items that you sent, all the items that you received, all the correspondence, because I've been watching like these ones that where I've seen these email account takeovers have happened, and they will get in sometimes 2 weeks before they actually start spamming, off of, using that email address as a mule or whatever to propagate bad wares. So what are they doing for 2 weeks? They're taking and looking to see what they got. They're stealing all your documents. They're doing all those kind of things. And one other thing that I don't think we are going to talk about is that cool thing about Barracuda is that you guys provide secure email within the mix, kind of natively off just the spam filter. It allows you to be able to even auto, like it'll look at the header, or you can put something in the subject line or the body of the email to trigger a secure email, or it can look through content, and if it sees a credit card or social security number or date of birth, it can automatically encrypt it, which I think is really huge for business owners, because even if you say all you got to do is put this little @ symbol in secure anywhere in the subject line or in the, and it'll send it secure, people still won't do it.
Yeah, good
So
safety nets to have for sure.
that's right. Automation. I always like to think about security as there's only one way. There needs to be a single path to ensure security. If there's two paths and it's like an option for somebody, and it's like all they have to do is this one little thing and it'll be secure, well, just you knocked your security down by at least 50%.
Yeah, totally agree.
So here's a real life example. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, this is just another example. We saw a few of them here today, but just kind of breaking down another one just to kind of drill it home. This is an email again from a trusted sender, Microsoft Outlook. Oh, we know them, right? We get emails from them all the time. But if you notice that little A. Johnson at school, K-12 GAUS in the brackets there, that's going to be a fake email address that is pretending to be Microsoft Outlook. And you can see, again, they're really trying to just say, hey, could you just pop in here real quick? Just wanted you to log in. And you're like, I thought I was logged in. Okay, let me just type my password again. Poof, they got you. And we try to just get these types of things in our database, figure out, these types of threats and be able to combat them with our products.
Yep. All right, we're up to another poll. So let me grab that poll. And the poll is, with the recent boom of artificial intelligence technologies, do you find that your inbox is being targeted by phishing emails more frequently than before? So what are you guys seeing out there as far as from a standpoint of after AI? And I don't know, Kevin, what's your thoughts? When did AI? I mean, AI has been around a long time, but it's like all of a sudden, in my way of thinking, it's like all of a sudden every damn thing's AI. When did that happen? Was that a year?
Yeah, it feels like about a year or two ago. I think what ChatGPT really blew up was when everybody started turning their heads, and ChatGPT being open source gave way to a lot of other things building on top of that. So they sort of harnessed the power to be able to do a lot more. It was a foundation of a lot of different AI products, but also by driving that market, it kind of pulls a lot of other AI vendors into the space. There's music that's generated by AI, images, different things that can interpret AI or use AI to interpret things like images. I take a picture of an image, it tells me what's on there. Lots of different things combining in there for sure.
Yep, for sure. So we have 10% say very often, 60% somewhat often, 20% not at all, and 10% not sure. Um, my take is that, but again, I'm very aware because I'm in this industry and I keep an eye on it, and I see how people are getting hacked. I think it is between somewhat often and very often. I think that there's a lot more uh, spam or malicious, I'll call it malicious email, that are happening since the AI really took a boom. I mean, you probably have the stats. I mean, y'all see a ton of mail. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't have the stats in front of me, but definitely, yeah. And I mean, it became a lot harder to detect the attacks because folks that would normally say, "Oh yeah, look at this. This is misspelled, poor grammar, bad, punctuation, those types of things," were easy to pick out for users. But now it's all clean, it's all perfect, and I can just keep regenerate, come up with something new. So it made things a lot more challenging. Fortunately, Barracuda already had AI in place really before it took off, so we were combating bad AI with our good AI. It certainly knocked us down for a bit, but we quickly kind of retrained our classifiers and figured out ways to keep up. But it certainly has hit pretty powerfully, and certainly, you know, a big thing. Yeah, for a big impact.
So we'll transition a little bit. Now we're going to talk about, we really have been just identifying the threat landscape, the things, the way the bad guys are operating. So let's talk about some ways where we can win, you know, and so let's, how are we going to, what is the right protection, I guess is what I want to arrive at in layman's terms. So we'll get started. Let's talk about the defenses that are kind of common and have been there. And now, because the bad guys are getting much more complex and more sophisticated, what's changing? Because what's more possible?
Yeah. So there's two different things you'll see here. Email gateway defense is our traditional product that's been around since even the physical gateways in 2003 when Barracuda released them. It's now become a SaaS, or basically a web browser based tool. API based inbox defense is just a fancy way of saying running like an app on a 365 environment. But the API based inbox defense is the one I've described as impersonation protection. It's the one that's really leveraging good AI to combat, the types of new attacks that we see out there. So the trend that you're going to notice is that the gateway is actually capturing what would be this simplified, traditional, older style of attacks like spam, malware, and some of the things you saw earlier on that timeline, sort of less complex to more complex. The things that were at the beginning are more from that traditional style email gateway. And that's because it's really designed to look for the black and white. We can say, if the email has this, I'm not interested in it, just shut it down. And so it's a very binary sort of a tool. Now, the API-based or the AI version of the product is going to capture some of the more targeted, more sophisticated attacks that you can see down further on the list here, which also, again, mimic the less complex to more complex we saw earlier. So it really, the lateral phishing, account takeover, some of the impersonation, that's all going to be pattern and behavior based. The AI is able to say, well, if you've done this in the past, then that's legitimate. But if this is out of the pattern, if this is out of the ordinary, that's when we can tell that it's no good.
Tell me about something that's give me an example of that, if you would, please. Like, what's out of the ordinary?
Yeah. So email addresses that you've used in the past, right? If you're always sending from the same email and then all of a sudden I use a Gmail address, it's definitely not me, right? Because it's breaking the pattern. Language that I might use, right? All of a sudden I'm asking you to pay me through Bitcoin, and Kevin's never asked me to pay through Bitcoin, or, he's making threats to me, those types of things, right? In the case of service impersonation, we know where someone like Microsoft has sent from for the last however many years. All of a sudden they're sending from this Gmail address. It ain't them, right? We could tell in that case. And the reason really that we did this is because with the traditional gateway, those rules can be figured out. And if somebody attacks and they figure out and they do things again and again, they're still, good to have in place, good defenses to have, but eventually they figure out what works and what doesn't work. Oh, I could just send Philip or Kevin an email that doesn't have any attachments, doesn't have any threats whatsoever, no payload, but I'm going to tell him, this language, these words, just this plain text, and I'm going to get his cell phone. I'm going to get him to do something. I'm going to get some information. And that's kind of what they've gone after. That socially engineered attack.
That's right. And, I think kind of understanding one way that I would say like the gateway works is, eventually the gateway even gets intelligent to some new things, like something brand new, like if they stole my account and they started spamming off me. And with traditional gateway type filters out there, I may get a bunch of them through, but at some point they go, hang on a minute, that's spam. Too many emails coming from that address. That the weightedness of the activities trigger the gateway, whereas this other catches it based off of behavior. Philip has never sent over 100 emails.
A little bit sharper. Yeah, exactly. And that's because the gateway would use reputation based inferences. So if enough people are reporting that 123.com is bad, all of a sudden we add it to a list, and now we could say, if you're on 123.com, you're not talking to anybody, right? You've said enough. Rate control as well is another way you said if they send too many emails. Okay, we know that an attacker is going to come from the same location a bunch of times, and if they break the limit of however many times we all allow, they've broken the rule. They can't talk to our users. So a couple of emails get through.
Yeah, more static versus more dynamic.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're talking about here, is just the the things that are the way a gateway works is more like that, where now explain to me, like I think of a 0 day as something that would be more challenging for an email gateway.
Yeah, so a zero-day threat could be a couple of things. In the case of the gateway here that it's described in this graphic, it's actually typically attachment-based threats.
Okay.
And so a lot of vendors in the space historically would say, well, I need that reputation, right? 10 computers have to blow up before I care about this attachment and before I'm going to add it to the list. Barracuda actually in the gateway has attachment scanning that we can sandbox the attachments and say, okay, well, if this is actually dangerous, I'm not going to let it through on day one, right? So those new attacks that no one's seen before, we don't need guinea pigs to tell us their computer's blown up. We test it and then we actually add it to the list immediately. And that list is
Gotcha.
shared across our firewalls and some of the other Barracuda products to say, okay, if we notice this attachment's still good, add it to the list and we can block those attacks that are brand new.
Basically, you're opening the mail and checking it in a safe environment. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why for the end user, sometimes it may, like if it's something new or something, it may take just a minute. Like there's an attachment on an email. Oh, I just sent it. You haven't received it. And it takes 2 minutes to receive it. It's because it's getting sandboxed. It's going through the TSA and getting patted down before it's passed through.
Yeah, I always think of it like if you had a box and you could set it on fire, you could electrocute it, you could dunk it underwater, you could drop it and do all these things. Is it going to explode or not, right? And if it doesn't, it's safe and let it through. Of course, we're not going to break the package in that scenario, but it's that kind of thing, right? Just shake it up, test it, see what it's going to do, see if we can get it to detonate.
Yep. Good way to put it. So, and this is going to be more of the advanced kind of AI driven ways of protection. If you could kind of lay that out for me.
Yeah, sure. So as you can see here, these are definitely the more advanced attacks. They're targeting the inbox. So they typically are going to be more socially engineered. Conversation hijacking, spear phishing, those types of things are really more derived towards the specific recipient. The traditional email gateway is really looking at spray and pray or somebody that's just blasting out a bunch of emails, but they're not really doing the research to figure out who they're talking to. They just want somebody to fall for it. And it's very, generic. It's not as targeted. Whereas these, you'll notice, have a lot more uniqueness to them, right? If I sent an email to somebody that was more in this realm, it has to be that specific recipient. If I sent it to somebody else, they're going to be like, I don't touch wire transfers. Why is this person asking about wire transfers? They're no, totally fake, right? So they do a lot more research. They figure out what works, and a lot of these, the common theme is it's a targeted attack that is for a specific recipient.
Yeah. And with the way that all these groups are basically syndicated, or they definitely share
Yes.
uh, knowledge and what works and what doesn't work. So it's very difficult. I think the world's probably changed in their mindset of what a hacker looks like. It isn't some guy in his underwear with a hoodie on in
In the
his
basement.
in his grandma's basement. It's this is a very sophisticated I had done a study. This has been some years back, and it was actually a lot of the hacking was coming from Ukraine, ironically,
Hmm.
but it was because they were all STEM trained, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, a suppressed economy. They had laws, of course, where they couldn't do extradition to the states, so they had there's pockets in the world where there's a lot of intelligent people that, that are not able to get a good job. And somebody comes along to do something that, bad, but they could make a good amount of money, and they can't get in trouble for it. Because, really what's very surprising to me, every once in a while, and I watch this pretty close, every once in a while they'll catch some bad guy, but it ain't often.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know it? I mean, think
Yeah.
about it. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, like $1 trillion industry, and they ain't catching these guys.
Yeah. And then they love to brag on the Black Hat forums as well. So that's another way that they're sharing information, right? Hey, you wouldn't believe how many people I tricked and how much money I got just by doing this simple thing. Oh, cool. Now a bunch of other people are going to try to copy
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
for sure. And like some of the AI, I'm speaking tomorrow at an event in Mobile about some security concerns with AI specifically. Have you looked at the worm GTP?
I feel like I've heard of it, but tell me more.
It's a platform it's specifically designed. It's almost like the Onion browser for the dark web. It's
Mm,
an AI that's specifically designed. It doesn't have any of the limitations, it's but it's more designed for hacking.
hmm Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I played around with it a little bit, and literally, if you want to know how to do something bad, they'll
It just
tell
tells
you.
you. Yeah, yeah.
They
With
just,
ChatGPT, it's got the barriers in place to say, write me an email to hack this person, and they'll say, I'm not going to do that, right?
yep. Whereas this is wide open, and of course, there's probably a lot more data that the way AI works. If they have a large pool of that information, you'll have a better answer,
Yeah,
basically. So,
yeah.
very, very, very interesting, very concerning to a large degree. All right, we better keep moving. So we'll talk about some pros and cons based off of, the gateway first here.
hmm Yeah, sure. So I can speak to this. So as you can see, the gateway is really happening before the physical mail server itself, whereas the API application programming interface, as I said earlier, runs like an app on the actual mail server itself. So as we're looking at the gateway here, some of the benefits are it's actually stopping things before it gets to the mail server. So it's not causing the mail server to do that computation. The gateway, you can think of like gates to a castle, right? It's protecting things. They have to go through the gateway to get in and through the gateway to get out. So it's really, an instance that's a hop that's happening before they get to the actual location. As we look in the gateway signature matching, that's where we were talking earlier about testing the attachments, where we can actually find out what's going on and create what we call like a hash or a signature that we say, okay, this is an attachment, this is an email that we know is no good. So don't even bother, looking at it any further if you notice this copy or this version. And then finally here with data exfiltration, the gateway is designed with a couple of features built into it for things like encryption, data loss prevention. So with the rules, as Phil was describing earlier, we can say, don't let credit cards leave without being encrypted. Don't let anybody swear. Don't let anybody say this keyword that is my secret project that I don't want anyone talking about. Maybe the latest iPhone news, for example, right? And as we look towards the bottom there, we can see the API is going to be a little bit more overwhelmed when we get to spam, because we can overwhelm that mail server by hitting it enough. Whereas the gateway, it's like totally outside of the actual mail server, and it's unimpacted, right? When we start to look at how the API based defense handles those types of data exfiltration and the sandboxing, it just doesn't do those types of things because that computation again has to happen on a separate server that is not the one that is processing all your mail.
Yeah, and that's real good stuff. One thing that you made a mention to something that I don't know when I learned this, but it was forever ago. But I thought it was so cool how hashing works. How every file has a different. Like every human's different.
Yeah, yeah.
Every file is different, and if you ever get one that is um, if you ever get one that is bad, you can't really, it is bad and you'll know it immediately. And that's how the filter works. It says, oh, we've
hmm
identified this one is bad. So it doesn't have to blow it up and sync it and everything
Nope.
else. It can just smell it and it
Yeah,
stops it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It
So
recognizes the way that it looks. Yeah. So,
the hash. Yeah.
and computers obviously can have a great memory. They can remember everything. So it's basically as soon as we figure out what's bad, we can say, okay, that's the one. Right now, using that hash, we can identify it.
Yeah. And the point really, guys, that we're making here is why you need both is
hmm
that, they work well together, but one solution wouldn't solve the problem because say if you didn't have a gateway and you had just the API stuff, yeah, the mail servers would be overrun with spam because
Yeah.
I don't know, it's about what, 70% of mail spam?
Yeah, actually, funny enough, the gateway is going to be protecting you from about 70 or 80% of the
Yeah,
spam and security threats that you see heading towards your mailboxes.
that's right.
But the more expensive ones tend to be the ones that the API and
Yeah.
the
Well, I
artificial
was just
intelligence is
saying,
covering. But
like without the gateway, if you like say you weren't doing gateway, you were just doing API stuff, the
mhm.
mail server couldn't process the
Yeah,
APIs
yeah, I could just
because it
send
would
you
be
enough emails.
overrun
Yeah,
like a denial of service attack or whatever.
exactly.
It'd get
Yeah, yeah,
overrun. So
for
I
sure.
was just
Yeah.
trying to make a kind of like for people to see where it's both of these are working in tandem and you really gotta have both in order to have a real effective solution nowadays.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well,
Yeah, I can
we
speak to
talked a
this here.
little bit about this. Yeah. You want to flesh this out a little more?
Yeah, so we talked about the good things about the gateway, which is that traditional style of email security. This slide just gets into, what it can't do, right? And a lot of it is because it's based on that binary rule set. You can configure it in an unlimited number of policies, but as you start to add more rules, you're going to have more false positives. So as you say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. It's like, well, there's this very thin line that people have to walk, and people aren't always predictable in most cases. So they're going to start to fall outside of that, and you're going to start blocking legitimate mail, and now you're impacting businesses because you're missing sales, you're missing opportunities, whatever, right? So it's definitely a really tricky thing in email to be like, we want this, but we don't want that. So in the sense of it's not a scalable solution, we can't continue to add those additional policies. But in addition to that, I also can't predict what types of things people are going to do, good or bad. So bad guys are going to come up with something new every day. I can create a new Gmail account every 30 seconds or more. I can come up with a new campaign. But then if I start blocking all of Gmail, I don't know if I'm going to get customers that are going to email me from Gmail. I can't tell you what their emails are going to be because they're brand new customers, right? So it's very difficult to tread that line from the gateway approach.
All right. This is talking about some LDAP, and we don't have to go too deep into that, but you know.
Yep. So this is just showing how we can figure out different uh, uh, derivations of where something is an LDAP entry, and it tries to match up with something that exists, and just evade specific rules by changing what they're doing ever so slightly. You can see the first one is Matthew Johnson, the next one is Matthew R. Johnson, the next one is Johnson Matthew, Matt Johnson, and the idea is that the rule-based systems is very specific. So if I say block an email from Matthew R. Johnson. Well, okay, now I'm Johnson Matthew, or I'm Matt Johnson, right? I'm just going to keep changing and changing and changing it.
Yep.
And now I'm blocking everybody with those types of names.
Yep.
So this is exactly what it's saying here. So I have a bunch of examples of a funds transfer, a money transfer, or make a payment, process an invoice. Okay, I'm going to say wire transfer, right? I'm just going to keep changing it. I'm just going to keep changing it. So the content filters are very binary, very black and white. Look for this. If you don't find it, you're all set. Well, I can just change it, or I can't really predict exactly what they're going to say. It's very difficult.
And if you do block it, hell, somebody really may use those words that are legitimate business.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, somebody now nobody can say make a payment. Yeah,
yeah.
For example.
And so we'll talk a little bit about the API way of working.
Mm-hmm. I started to touch on this, but just to drive it home a little bit more, the API really is working as an application in Office 365 itself. So that gives it access to things like the email that exists there. It's able to pull strings and use some of the functions of the actual server itself. So we can automatically delete mail, we can move mail around, we can do things with the tools that we're given in that server.
Yep. All right. And then just talking about the classifiers, when we spoke prior to this, I was really intrigued by how classifiers work. See if you can do that again, as far as how this is getting a little bit in the weeds, guys, but this is how it works, and I think it's important to kind of understand it. So what's a classifier?
Yep. I think of them as like formulas or patterns of how an attack would present itself. And we leave out some of the variables of it, right? So if I said somebody's impersonating him, well, what are they going to do when they impersonate him? That's the formula. They're going to take a name of somebody that you're used to. They're going to use language that you're used to, but they're going to change the email address. So we say, okay, if the email address is different from what we've seen in the past, and we notice that the sender is copying a name that we have seen in the past. Right now, they've changed the pattern, and we know what's real and what's not. So the classifiers are basically ways that we say, here's the way that it's going to present itself. And we've noticed that, this is the rule that scales, and this is what we've seen across everybody else. And here's the pieces of the puzzle that fit into this specific situation.
Yep. And that's cool. And even like it can identify the location by which you're accessing the server and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, so in the impersonation protection, it's got both protection for emails that are coming through, but also where people are logging in from. So we're leveraging the AI to take help for those account takeover situations where someone's getting their passwords stolen. So in the location sense, we can say, well, Philip's never logged in from Africa or Australia or something like that. So obviously it's not him, right? Historically, he's done this, and now it's not following that pattern.
Yeah, for sure. And that's very important, because whenever you see these things happen, but now with, VPNs, you say you geofence it where only people in the US can access. Well, there's VPNs that'll tunnel them up in New York, so they look like they're coming from New York, which makes for even a more challenging thing. But it can do impossibilities where if you're logging in from Massachusetts, and then all of a sudden you're trying to log in from Miami, it says that don't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't do that.
You can't. Impossibility. Yeah, for sure. So real cool stuff on that. So we'll go ahead and we'll kind of juxtapose the API method like we did the gateway.
Yep. So this is just the other side of the coin here. So we can basically start to see how the API defense is less effective for the high volume attacks, as we described earlier. So that you can get overwhelmed. You're using a single computer, a single server, be it virtual, but still it's a single entity that is trying to not only handle people logging in, logging out, sending and receiving mail, but by receiving mail, I can overwhelm you. I can start to send you things that would start to slow down your email. So you try to go and check your Outlook, and now it's not working. So the API is really less effective for those types of high volume attacks for that reason. Because again, we're like running like a program on the computer. So if the program on your phone is interpreting a bunch of spam coming through, your phone's going to run really sluggish. But if we have something before it gets to your phone that is scanning things, your phone remains unimpacted.
Yep. So that's really very cool how the API works. I love thinking about really how we're able to use technology. One thing that I always try to think about whenever I meet with a client, or I meet with a potential client, or anybody, and they're talking about technology and they're talking about how bad it is, I know they're not using it right, because technology should be an accelerant, even by definition. And so I think that's kind of cool. All right, so we got one more poll here that let's see. Let's see. This one I don't think is actually in here, but well, there it is. So, is your organization safe from email protection? Yes or no? Do you feel confident that no one in the organization is going to click on something this afternoon? How secure do you feel like your organization is? They're ripping away at that. We got some yeses and nos. Made this one really simple. So, all right, we'll end that poll and share it. So basically 44% of people feel like they're safe, and 56% feel like they're not safe. I want to ask you a loaded question, Kevin.
Mhm.
Like statistically, like we're thinking, 95% of threats are coming in on email. If you had both of these solutions in place, do you have any type of data that talks about it from a statistical standpoint of how much risk reduction there is?
Not offhand. I would say it's a lot, but it's never 100%.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's the easy way to answer it. I mean, that's why we use a layered approach. There's new attacks that are coming out every single day. There are things that this filter is just simply not going to catch because they're just using new strategies and things that we haven't seen before. So it's never 100%, but significantly reduced for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably in the 80s or 90s, I would assume.
Yeah. And that's what I would think too, is if you're using both approaches. The cool thing that I like as a guy who's got to deliver the solution is that I've got that Barracuda engineering behind me. So when I apply the filter, y'all are updating the algorithms and changing the rules and all of those type things where and it makes sense because of the amount of volume of email that you guys get. Y'all are probably one of the are you the largest? You think you're more mails passing through Barracuda filters than, I guess maybe Microsoft has more? Or
Microsoft has a bigger footprint in email. One of the things that we benefit from is we're sharing a lot of the information across our different devices, right? So I was mentioning earlier how the attachment scanning is shared across many devices. So where Microsoft has a bigger footprint than us in email, they're not looking at network security. They're not looking at web filtering of any kind, right? So anything that would come over someone's firewall and it's a malicious attachment, now we know that attachment's dangerous across all of our other products. So we are actually looking at multiple different threat vectors, which tends to be what folks will use more commonly, whereas Microsoft does have a bigger footprint, but they're only honed in on email, nothing else.
yep. So
Yeah.
let's talk about this multi-layered approach here. You know, with that, you got your kind of walk us through these multi-layers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, there's one more at the top there, which is going to be the human layer. That's the last layer of defense before your actual assets, your financial gains, what they're actually really after. So funny enough, this is almost in reverse order, but the human firewall, right? Keeping them aware. Hey, if we train you guys that look out for these things, take a second. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. If you're not expecting an email from somebody, double take. Those types of things are huge, right? Because they're going to protect you from actually causing the action, clicking on the link, giving somebody information, sending a wire transfer, because you guys are the ones that are actually the last line of defense. But we can try to layer things to make that job easier for you. And fraud protection is really that AI, the artificial intelligence base that we've been talking about today, to say, okay, if something does get past the gateway, which is going to be sort of the lower layer there, we're still able to say, okay, is it following the pattern? Is it coming from an email address that we don't expect? Is it saying something that's out of the ordinary? And that's where we can start to get the more targeted attacks that the gateway, which is kind of like the rules as you're getting on a plane, for example, you can't bring this, you can't bring that, boom, we stop them. But even before they get on the plane, we're like, okay, let's just, ask a few questions, and that sort of thing gets through. Resiliency is kind of the way that we say, even if everything goes wrong, we have another copy somewhere else. So backing up is a way for us to keep files out of the line of fire somewhere else, your OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, all that stuff somewhere else. So if all else fails, we still got it somewhere else. It's crypto locked. Now we just bring it right back.
I think that a lot of people don't realize that Microsoft does not guarantee a backup of your SharePoint or of
Nope.
of that tenancy.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
I've had so many people say, "Oh no, I know they do," and then I go show them the fine print where it
Yeah,
says
the terms
they're
and
not.
conditions. We actually have a slide that we share out in many of our new sales, new business
Yeah.
opportunities to say, look, Microsoft is actually telling you to go get a third party tool like Barracuda. They don't call out Barracuda specifically, but they do say go get one, because a lot of people think, oh, my things are in the cloud, they're all set, they're protected. Well, it's more for access, right? So I can now see all my stuff on my laptop, on my phone, on my tablet, at home, at work, all over, but it's the same file. It's happened to me in the past, unfortunately, that we didn't have a backup product, and something I was working on. It's always tends to be my biggest files, my biggest Excel spreadsheet that I work on all the time, became corrupted. I said, oh, I'll just go and get the latest version from my OneDrive. And IT says it's the same one, right? Because as soon as you do something to your file, it's auto saving, it's auto backing up, so that now you can get it on your tablet and everywhere else. So if it gets crypto locked, if it gets destroyed, if it corrupted or anything, poof, it's gone across all the different devices. So having a second copy of everything somewhere else that we're sort of packing it away is huge. Email continuity is another one that goes into resiliency, because that's a way for Barracuda to allow you to continue to send and receive messages if your mail server goes down. So for whatever reason you can't reach your mail, now you can use Barracuda to keep answering, keep things going. A lot of hurricanes happening right now in America, so that was a big one for us, that people are leaning on us for keeping their businesses running and the lights on.
Yep. And of course, we've got our gateway defense that we kind of talked about.
Yep.
And
yeah, that's the rules and all that. And archiving is in there as well, just hanging on to everything for searching and compliance.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think that sometimes is confusing for end users. A backup is not the same thing as archiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, backup is more for restoration, so I can take something and put it back to where it came from. It's typically a point in time, capturing things at a moment. So it's like, that's what life was like exactly at that time of that day. Whereas archiving is going at all times. So when I send an email, it immediately goes to the archiver. If I receive an email, same thing. We can do searches. We can do things with the archiver. It's built for compliance. It's got audit logs, really designed for, somebody says, whoops, let me clean up my tracks before the backup goes through. Nope, sorry, we already got it. Right? Those types of things.
That's right. So very cool. And it works, of course, on Exchange, on-prem, G Suite, and Office 365 servers. Cool stuff. And ultimately, that's what we want to do, is we want to really monitor the environment so we can, handle all aspects of it. So we've got this, this that we're going to send out too is going to be basically a spear phishing trend. It's going to be some information about really a little deeper dive. And I don't know, did you have any input in writing this, or what is this, Kevin?
I love that fish logo. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's cool.
But yeah, we push this out. It's an ebook that you guys can learn a little bit more about the trends. Keeping people educated, I think, is the biggest thing. We don't have the biggest footprint in email, but we do have one of the bigger ones. So we know what types of attacks people are falling for. QR-based attacks came out recently. That was a big one that hit the markets. And, they put a QR code. A lot of systems weren't able to read the QR code, go to the link and do something about it. So we added some classifiers to be able to pick that up and those types of things, right? Everything is changing. And I think AI is a big one, big impact. We talked about how big of an impact it was, but things continue to change, and it's a cat and mouse game. I've said it a few times. We're going to keep trying to stay on their heels, and they're going to keep trying to find ways to get around it.
Yep, for sure. So really, next steps for us is we want to talk to you about how to get all 13 threats covered, and then want to talk a lot about educating employees on the latest email threats, as well as monitoring, automate, and streamlining everything. And for everybody on the call, we're going to do a free analysis for you on your, now this will only work in Office 365, but this is a quick scan where we can scan and actually see how much activity that was malicious that is happening within your organization, your entire Microsoft 365 tenancy. Give me some granularity on that, Kevin. What is it that we're gonna see?
Yeah, so this is a direct translation to the AI product, and it shows you what life would have been like for the last 6 months if you'd only had this, AI product from Barracuda. But it's a free scan that says we would have caught this, we would have caught that. It doesn't capture things that were deleted already, so we can't find the invisible, but for something that may still exist in the junk folder and your deleted items or something of that nature, it's able to comb through and essentially identify, hey, this is an attack, this is why it's bad. We can also tell you which individuals in your environment are more at risk. This person handles money, this person holds an executive position. And for things like DMARC, DKIM, SPF, which are becoming really powerful in the industry, and folks like Google and Yahoo have really pushed and become advocates of, that's going to be highlighted in that scan as well. So all the ways that we can show value directly of the product in a one-to-one translation of what we can offer.
Show you how many basically threats went through that, fortunately nobody clicked on, or maybe unfortunately they did. And then also emails that were blocked because of a certain, like DKIM or SPF or something. Very, very cool report. It's really a fascinating report. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of it. If you've got Microsoft 365, Office 365 products, we'll do a free scan. It doesn't take long. You really don't have to do anything. I'll do everything. And we'll take a look at your mailbox to see what happened, over the past month or so. All right, so that's it for now. As far as if you have questions, you can get in touch with us, and we'll turn it back over to Christy as far as any type of questions that came in.
Yes, so we had a question that came in that said, how can we stop employees from clicking phishing links? My bad.
You can't. Yeah, I mean, you're trying to you educate them and try to take those emails away, right? I mean, so they're really at the end of the day going to click, a lot of things that come through their inbox. Keeping people educated, not to get into their habits, not into their daily routine, to say, what's this? What's that? Oh, I didn't expect an email from Kevin Davy at Barracuda right after the webinar. Why would he be sending me this PDF document? That's kind of weird, and those types of things, just having the aha moments of, this seems strange is one thing, right? Keeping the end users educated, but also using products to try to keep those types of things out of their inboxes so that they don't have the opportunity to do it.
Yep. I think that's that's the big part that I would add to that is simply, first order of business, do no harm. Don't let it ever get in their inbox. And then secondly, train them so that if it ever does, they have a suspicious mind or whatever. I'm always looking at it, I think I look at life in statistics, when I'm looking at risk, and I'm mathematically computing where risk lives, and then I count how much money it takes to reduce that risk. And so I'm trying to be as smart as possible, if you will, or effective, or whatever you want to say. But 95% of successful attacks come in via email. That's pretty, to me, that's a red flag. And that's why for people who follow me or whatever, they always hear me talking about email, MFA, doing this, doing, all these things that we want to do, because I've been doing this 25 years. And, as of recently, for really a long time, we have not seen any successful security incidents that are not. I had a client that got tricked on the phone. They got a call and went up wiring some money. Believe it or not, they thought it was their bank or something. But I have not seen it where there was like a firewall got hacked or this happened or that. But email has been kicking our ass. Email account. And I'm just sitting there being an evangelist preaching, you got to do this, you got to do this, and it still happens. So I just can't encourage people enough to, for the money, it's the best money you're going to spend. Train your people to recognize threats and do what you can to make them where they never show up in the inbox. All right, Christy, anything else?
Yes. Last one. What's the biggest email threat we should watch out for?
I think that changes all the time. The biggest is kind of a generic term. I would say, QR codes were a big one recently. A lot of things that are trying to ask you to do something, wire transfer me this, go buy iTunes gift cards. You better do this or else, send me this Bitcoin. Those types of things are pretty easy to pick out. If it's too good to be true, it probably is, or if it seems like something that needs to happen quickly, think twice, double check, be sure. Any amounts of money, any money that's being transferred or that's being sent, be 1,000% positive, triple check yourself. I think the money transfers are probably the ones that you can really keep an eye out for. Philip kind of started to go into some of the tactics that attackers will use today to evade products like Barracuda, and it's layers on their side too. So I'm going to send you an email that brings you to a SharePoint site, and the SharePoint site has you download a file, and the file has a link in it that brings you to another site that you click on, and you're like, you've gone through 10 steps, and now Barracuda can't follow that far, right? We can't scan that far. So I don't think there's any product on the market that can even come close. So, if you find yourself going through hoops and leaps and bounds to get something or to do something, it's probably fake, right? And
especially if it's requiring email address, password, multi-factor
log in, do this, do that,
all that
download this.
That's the one that I am seeing overwhelmingly take over people's accounts. And I don't really know what they're doing while they're in their inbox as far as how many documents they're stealing. And, you'd have to hire a forensics team to find that out. So I doubt very seriously that it's just because they're living in there. I watch when they, I can go back and look at the logs and see when it actually happened. And then, and I think with a forensic team, you could actually go in and see if they copied files and all that. But, that's a very in-depth process, be very expensive to pull that off. But I'm certain that they're not just saying, oh, great, I got this guy's email address, I'm gonna wait 2 weeks before I start spamming off of them. I know they're looking at documents. I know they're looking at emails to see how they can make the most of what they've captured.
100%.
Yep. So, well, guys, I just want to say thank you to Kevin and to Christy and for putting all this together and getting us all together. And you did a great job, Kevin. Thank you. It was very informative.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Yeah. And if you guys have other questions or if you want to take us up on that scan, I can't just from a business perspective, that scan is cool if you want to know what the hell is going on in your organization as far as it relates to email risk. Really a deep dive and really it formats it in such a beautiful way to show you where those risks are. So take us up on that. That's free. We'll be happy to do that. And we'll sign off. We're 3 minutes late, and I appreciate y'all's time today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.